Ghosts appear in many forms. We can see them.
What was that?
We can hear them.
I am not afraid.
And sometimes we can even feel them. We've gone around the globe in search of the most terrifying spirits and supernatural beings who continue to live on long after their deaths. On World's Scariest Hauntings, anything can happen. Because you never know who's watching when the lights go out.
What the hell was that?
In this episode, a medieval English house built on top of an ancient pagan burial site.
I think if you unearth human remains, ancient or not, you're gonna get angry spirits.
Devil worshipping and human sacrifice have taken place within the four walls of this quaint-looking inn.
You don't realise until you actually step foot in there just how horrible that place actually is.
This is the unholiest of homes.
The Bishop of Gloucester visited the Ram Inn to exorcise the spirits and was later quoted, "The Ram Inn was the most evil place that he had ever had the misfortune to visit."
Gloucestershire, Britain. The small village of Watton-under-Edge lies within the Cotswolds, a scenic part of the country where people often come to enjoy the peace and serenity of the English countryside. But there is one building that looks a little out of the ordinary, an eyesore on the picturesque landscape. Experts believe devil worship was practiced here and that human sacrifices were made within these four walls. It's unsurprising the ancient Ram is believed to be one of the most haunted buildings in Britain. The medieval inn has been in Caroline Humphrey's family for 50 years.
These buildings could tell a story nobody else can. The youngsters today, they don't really know what history is until you walk into a building. You can smell it, you can feel it. It's so totally different to any normal house. When young people come in, they walk around with their chins on the ground, you know, they cannot believe it.
Paranormal investigator Chris Howley has been studying the listed property for over a decade.
I mean, as soon as you see the ancient Ram Inn, you can see how old the building is. So the energies that are within the building, you should be in for a good night, regardless of any activity. Just the feelings of the history of the building alone that are seeping through every pore of the brickwork just fill you with excitement, really.
Fellow ghost hunter Phil Jones is also fascinated by the Ram.
I've probably been here somewhere in the region of 15 to 20 times. We went through a phase of, we had so much happening, and so much unexplained stuff. We just loved the place, we just kept coming back. At one stage, I think we came here 5 times in 1 year or something ridiculous. But it's just a fascinating place. Always left us with unanswered questions, which is what we want, really.
During a Ouija board session at the ancient Ram, Phil and his fellow enthusiasts had a paranormal encounter, all captured on camera.
And we were talking away, asking questions as you do.
Can you point the glass to who you intend to affect?
And then all of a sudden the energy changed. The movement of the glass on the table became very violent. But all of a sudden we could hear this noise.
What the hell's that?
And it sounded like drums. And I was like, well, what's that coming from? The first thing we do on investigation, everybody turns their phone off because it affects the equipment. And I said to the girl sat next to me, Liz, and I said, that's your phone. She goes, it can't be, it's turned off. I said, that's coming from your coat.
Oh, it is?
This is your phone.
Yeah, but how did that go off?
So she pulled her phone out, and the phone was playing a video of her children, which had been to an African drumming class that day, just like a child's activity. She turned the video off, she put the phone on the table. And we carried on, and the glass was going violently again. And then all of a sudden, on the corner of the camera, the screen just went bright.
Oh, my God!
She picked the phone, she showed it to the camera, and it's just reoccurring number 6s, one after another, across the whole screen. And that was pretty eerie, pretty frightening. You know, our first sort of real experience of some of the bad vibes in this place, and it unnerved quite a few people, that did, for sure.
It's widely believed that the ancient ram is built on top of a pagan burial ground, which may explain the paranormal activity within.
Historically, there was a lot of importance put on the type of burial you receive, and if you had not been buried correctly, it could possibly lead to somebody's spirit having to come back into the real world and not being able to settle in the afterlife. So to then disrupt a burial site after somebody had been correctly buried would bring them back from the dead, essentially.
When you lay somebody to rest, whether it's their ashes or their bones, that is a special ritual in itself. You're making a holy, sacred, safe place. And when you unearth that, and you don't properly take the steps to do right what was done wrong, you're going to upset the other side, or whoever's bones you're doing this to.
And the fact that there was sacrifice, human sacrifice, child murders, highwaymen killing and murdering people there. You have all of this over many, many hundreds of years building up on the property and the land, and it's absorbed into the fabric of that building. There's no place for those spirits to go, and that seems to just trap them there, almost like a portal to the other side.
The ancient Ram Inn has stood in Watton-under-Edge for 1,000 years. It's one of the oldest houses in Britain.
I think it was built in the 900s, but our deeds go back to the 11th century. It's in the Domesday Book saying it goes back to Richard the Lionheart's reign. I believe it was a manor house, it was a tannery, it was also a brewery for the church. So the people that lived here were anything from peasants to royalty, really.
Historically, we don't know too much between 1145 and 1350. All that we know for this period of time is it was predominantly a church house, and it would have been used to house the stonemasons involved in the building of St Mary's Church, and possibly slaves, including children.
By the 20th century, the Ram was badly in need of renovation, and a local carpenter couldn't resist the challenge.
It was 1968 when John Humphreys bought the ancient Ram Inn for £2,500, and it wasn't until then that we got to hear of all the ghost stories.
Well, in 1968 I was 7. There were no such thing as ghost hunting events then, and nobody really wanted to come and look for ghosts. Mum and Dad didn't really elaborate on the paranormal activity that was going on here because obviously they didn't want to scare the children. I slept above the grave and in various other places in the Ram, and had I known that, probably at the time, I'd have run a mile.
John lived amongst the spirits at the Ram for nearly 50 years until he sadly passed away in December 2017.
John is a legendary character in the paranormal world. He's had so much dealings with the paranormal, both inside and outside of the ancient Ram. He was a very lovable rogue, very eccentric, very, very knowledgeable about the history of the Ram.
John himself feels like the spirits know him, and he has a connection with them. And I believe his spirit is probably still there, looking after the place.
During John's time at the ancient Ram, he discovered many of the reasons behind the paranormal activity.
We do know that the ancient Ram Inn is built on the intersection of 2 ley lines. Now, ley lines are said to be naturally occurring bands of energy that span the globe, and ancient monuments have been built along these lines. So it said the energy from Stonehenge could be powering the building for all the spirits and ghosts that inhabit this place. Also, we know that water was redirected from 2 streams during the building of St Mary's Church, and it's also said that a dark portal of negative energy, demonic in nature, was opened up. So You've got a building here built on ley lines with a portal of demonic energies. And I'm just wondering in 1968 if John actually knew that when he bought the property.
The ancient ram has become infamous amongst the ghost hunting community.
The building's been featured on television and it's very well known in the paranormal community, and it is on the bucket list of every paranormal investigator to come and investigate here.
So once you do walk in, it's quite dusty, it's quite old, it's quite dark and quite damp as well. You don't realise until you actually step foot in there just how horrible that place actually is.
I first started investigating at the Ancient Ram Inn back in 2005. My first thought when I walked through the door was, this is going to be a good night. Very oppressive atmosphere, dark. You can almost feel the energy within the building when you first step over the threshold.
Which is exactly how the guests must have felt when John Humphreys opened the doors of the Ram to the public.
John bought the Ram Inn with his wife and moved in with his family to run the place as a B&B. And John has quite amusing stories when they had guests in. They'd be cooking breakfast and they'd have the bacon and eggs in the kitchen on the side. They'd turn round to grab some toast to put on the plate, and then as they returned to the plate of the bacon and eggs, it had vanished. It's also said that many of their guests who had spent the night in the bishop's room would leave the Ram Inn in the middle of the night, never to return because of what it was that they'd experienced within the building.
They were able to get out of the windows, I do believe, because the building's built in a bank, so a bishop's room, I would think, is quite easy to get out of. People used to leave in the middle of the night, never to be seen again.
The sheer volume of spirits beneath the thatched roof of the Ram may keep some people away, but for a paranormal investigator, the medieval home is incredibly alluring.
So the Ancient Ram Inn, in my opinion, is teeming with spiritual energy. There are so many different levels of energy from different history and points of history. You have intelligent spirits there, and those are able to communicate intelligently with you. They're able to interact with you, move objects, leave messages on voice recorders. Residual energy, however, is more like your ghost. So you might get that impression of something forming in the room and then walking off and disappearing into a door or a wall. So residual energy is like a playback of past events, like echoes of the past.
The oppressive atmosphere may make the ancient Ram feel uninhabitable for human life, but the dark, historic building is the perfect home for a whole host of paranormal beings. The ancient Ram Inn sits uncomfortably within the beautiful village of Wotton-under-Edge in the Cotswolds. The building, believed to be Britain's most haunted property, used to be 3 times larger and was used by various industries until 1820, when it became a pub. The main seating area was christened the men's kitchen.
In the men's kitchen, we have reports of baby crying, so you hear that sound coming out of the darkness. The reports of 2 apparitions, 2 men stood either side of the fireplace. But I think the most famous one is the lady in blue, who's the ghost of, the name that we've been given is Elizabeth, and she was apparently murdered by 2 highwaymen, and her ghost still haunts the old kitchen area.
Fabrics of a building will always hold on to recordings, so what we would say aren't intelligent beings, but the fabric of the building, the stone actually absorbs the energy, so it's more like a video replay.
Energy can't be destroyed or created, so it's got nowhere to go. So if it's good energy, it makes a good imprint. If it's something bad or horrific, the imprint is bad and negative, and it stays there.
Ghost hunter Phil Jones was holding a spirit board session in the men's kitchen when one of the team members began to feel unwell.
You could see her gradually sinking into the point where we had to carry her out the building. She just couldn't walk. You know, she was just like a rag doll. One of our medium sensitives who was with us at the time picked up on this quite negative energy.
In the moment, there is a shadow that's kind of over top of you.
The room went colder, the feel completely changed, the atmosphere completely changed, people noticed it.
Could it be that Phil and his team had contacted one of Elizabeth's murderers?
The sensitive said there's a spirit here and he's called Michael, and he isn't a very nice guy. He said some horrible things about some of the things he had done or what he wanted to do, and the whole atmosphere changed. Some of our team become very sort of edgy and aggressive and not very like themselves, I don't believe in demons, but I do believe in a saying, as above, so below. I mean, if you're not a very nice person in life, you're probably not going to be a very nice person in death.
Upstairs in the Ram is the most haunted room of all, one that former owner John Humphreys treated with trepidation and respect.
I think one of the most interesting rooms in the ancient Ram Inn has got to be the bishop's room. I know John used to have a ritual before entering the room. He would grab the crook.
I've got to give you permission to go in here.
And rap on the door 3 times, calling out, "Is anybody here?"
Is there anyone here?
And making the sign of the cross, he would enter the room. Now, John says he used to do this because countless times when he was in his bed at night, fast asleep, he would be woken by the door of the bishop's room being rattled furiously and making quite a sound which echoed through the building. And so John said by performing this ceremony, it seemed to calm that activity down.
I think the bishop very much appreciates that. Just him giving the common courtesy, I'm gonna knock 3 times before I come into the door. It's just like living with someone else, having spirit in your home. And spirit should also respect you too, and your boundaries that you have, because it is your home and you're coexisting together.
The mood in the bishop's room is quite dark, especially at night when you've got the lights out. You've got 3 beds, which are commonly used by ghost hunters to sit on.
Years ago, before ghost hunting was invented, Dad had a paranormal team. They ended up stabbing the beds because you get a very heavy weight on your chest when you're sleeping in there. Or even awake sometimes, you can feel the pressure on your chest. It affects your chest for some reason.
After accommodating thousands of guests, it's no surprise that the bishop's room is bursting with paranormal activity.
This would have been the guest room where many guests fled the building in fear of the activity that was going on from the room. I mean, we've got stories of one of the former innkeepers being killed by having his head pushed into the flaming fire. It's quite a horrific way to die, so you can almost hear his screams coming from that fireplace. We've got the cavalier who was witnessed coming through the window on horseback through the room.
Phil Jones's paranormal team captured some amazing footage in the bishop's room.
3 of the girls from the team went up into the bishop's room and took the spirit ball with them and placed it on the table. They'd had some experiences there earlier in the evening. They wanted to try and open some sort of communication, get some confirmation, so they decided to use the spirit board. And they were asking the questions, and they just literally placed their fingers on the glass, and the glass slid from under the fingers. It didn't tip, it didn't fly off and smash, it just shot off the board and their fingers are on the glass. Can't explain it. The table was level, the glass and the board were all level, nobody pushed it, they're literally just resting their fingertips.
There was definitely some supernaturalness going on with the glass moving itself. That's definitely unexplained evidence right there that I would say is supernatural, for sure.
Along the corridor from the bishop's room is another terrifying bedroom.
This is known as the Beaufort room, but also the witch's room. Now, it's nicknamed the witch's room because it is alleged that a witch hid out in this room with her familiar, the black cat, prior to being executed at the stake in the village. During the witch trials, anybody deemed to be doing anything against the church would have been deemed a witch. So they would have been hunted down and forcibly dragged off, and they were guilty regardless and executed quite unceremoniously.
The murdered woman clearly has unfinished business.
She has been cited as a shadow figure that walks across the room. I have witnessed it myself, where I was on the landing just looking in through the doorway, and a shadow passed the door frame coming from this side, across the frame, and appearing to walk towards this side of the room. I came in expecting to find one of the team in here, but the room was empty.
Paranormal expert Barry Guy also had a supernatural encounter in the witch's room.
As we were sat in the room, we placed an object called a REM pod outside of the door. Now this device basically emits its own electromagnetic field, and if anything disturbs this field, the lights will flash and it will give off an audible alarm that you can hear. All of a sudden we heard the REM pod start going off. So we knew there was something outside interacting with the device or moving towards it. It started getting louder. It got louder and louder and louder. And then it was buzzing, almost as if a spirit was holding onto this device outside of the door. We waited with bated breath, and I decided, as the team leader, should I get up and open this door? And just before I lifted myself off the seat, there was the almighty crash and a bang on the wooden door of the witch's room. It shook. I mean, the whole room vibrated at the same time. We were all petrified. It was like pandemonium. It was such an intense experience because it happened quite quickly, but it was loud, and we knew we were the only people in the building. We had locked up, so who else could it have been? Why was the REM pod going off violently? It was almost as if something was gripping hold of the device to make it shriek and that alarm to go off.
And where there's a witch, there's a cat.
It was coming to the end of one of our sessions one night. I put the camera down on the floor, actually, put the EVP recorder down on the floor as well, and we were all chatting away, and we all heard it as a disembodied voice, a cat meowing.
What was that?
That was meowing.
We all sort of questioned if did anybody sort of flick a camera switch or anything that could remotely sound like a cat.
What was that?
And nobody had any equipment in their hands. We just sat down listening and doing the EVP session, and it definitely sounded like a meow. I'm pretty convinced it was a cat.
Even the locals are scared of the witch's room.
One of the other reports in this room is residents of Wootton Under Edge passing the ram have reported seeing a little girl, apparently crippled, just smiling at them throughout this window. Now, residents are aware of the legend of the Ram Inn, of all the ghosts here. Many of them will cross the road to avoid the Ram Inn and coming face to face with this soulless little girl just staring at them.
On top of all the stories about the witch's room, some remarkable footage was also captured here.
One night, a group of ghost hunters were investigating this room, and they actually sent me the footage that they caught. They were sat in this area, just doing normal calling out, is anybody here? And the locked off camera had in sight, on the floor just down here, a camera bag with the strap, which was up. When you watch back the footage, you can see that the strap actually moves quite forcibly downwards on its own. And it's quite an intriguing piece of footage, one of my favourites from this room.
In that particular clip, you seem to see a bag in the corner of the screen, and there's a handle that appears to get pulled, lifted, and drops back down. And that is a sign of an intelligent haunting, an intelligent spirit, something that's able to communicate physically with the living.
Generally, I don't get scared, but the Ram Inn is, after 15 years of investigation, is one building I don't think I could pluck up the courage to stay alone in. It's the atmosphere. I'm used to ghost hunting, I'm quite rational, but this place is unique. The atmosphere is unique. It is so oppressive. I don't think I could spend the night here on my own.
The energy running through the walls of the building makes the ancient ram an uncomfortable yet fascinating place to visit. It's little wonder that some spirits also find it's impossible to leave. The ancient Ram Inn is a small, unassuming house in the village of Watton under Edge in Gloucestershire that fascinates and excites paranormal investigators worldwide. Ghost hunter Lee Bullock remembers his first visit to the 12th century building.
It's just the history, more than anything. I mean, it's next to two ley lines that are intersecting. It's a very, very old building. There's supposed to be sacrifices here, devil worship, witches that were killed here. So with a history like that, you've got to come and try and get something from the paranormal world. Coming through the door and walking through, especially coming up to the stairs, old wooden beams, old brickwork, very eerie, very, very eerie, and you felt creepy. It's the fear of the unknown.
Lee has visited twice and both times felt the power of the ram.
The first experience, when we were in the bishop's room, we heard chains. We were in another room and we could hear some sort of voice, a whiny voice, come through on the cameras.
Is there anything you'd like to ask?
Are you trapped here? Are you trapped here?
Intrigued, Lee and his team returned as soon as they could.
So the second time we were here, we were investigating all downstairs. We did the bar area, the old barn, and then we got to the living room. Now, in the living room, we decided to do an EVP session using a digital recorder.
Okay, so we're here at the Ancient Ram Inn, EVP session 1 in the living room.
When we listened to it back, we heard a whistling on there.
What was that?
None of us whistled. We know that. I've got the cameras to prove it. It couldn't have come from outside, because if it had, we would have heard it as well as the cameras picking it up. So we just can't explain that.
What was that?
Straight after that, we think we've caught a couple of voices. A female saying something like, "Take this away," followed by a man saying, "Cecil" or "Cecil." We just don't understand where those voices come from.
Spirits there like to communicate with you. They like to leave a response or a voice. Sometimes you don't even know that it's happened until you play back the recording afterwards. But on occasion, when you're in a room and you're calling out for spirits to interact with you, you might hear a response, or you hear a sound or word, but only one of you hears it, the rest of you don't. That's what I call a DVP, direct voice phenomena.
The mysterious voice scared Lee.
It's kind of weird to hear something that you think, well, it doesn't have a body, it doesn't have a voice, it doesn't have lungs, vocal cords, tongue, mouth. How is it doing this? How is it whistling? How is it talking? Was it dead 100 years, 50 years, 500 years? Why is it communicating now?
Caroline Humphreys was just 7 years old when her family moved into the Ram in 1968. She came back to live here in the early 2000s.
And I got the opportunity in my mid-30s to live in the attic for a year, which was lovely. It's a beautiful building to live in. One day, we could hear a lot of noise. It sounded like our dog had been stuck behind some furniture and rubbish in the attic. And we went through all the attic junk. We couldn't see the dog. So we were going down the attic stairs looking for the dog, and the bedside cabinet from my bedroom was stuck in the doorway. So we removed the cabinet in order to look for the dog and evacuate the attic. And all over the floor were my cartomancy books, and my tarot cards come out of the box, and still no sign of the dog. And he was downstairs up against Dad's door. He was shaking like a leaf, and Dad was sat down, totally oblivious of any activity that had happened.
Something had pushed the cupboard down the attic stairs. Could it be evidence of an active poltergeist in the ancient Ram?
Poltergeist is basically a noisy spirit, so that is a spirit that will move things, throw things, potentially touch you.
This is a ghost that people would consider to be malicious and threatening to the person that's being attacked by them. And they would be considered to be autonomous and intelligent, and they have their own personality.
Spirit manifests and holds energy in many different ways, whether it's taking it from the person or whether it's just able to harness the energy of the universe around it. So that's how I would explain the poltergeist activity. It's the energy that spirit's able to harness and how they're able to move or touch things. Because if they don't have a lot of energy, then they can't really make anything happen. If they have a lot of energy, then they can affect this or that or touch you or make themselves known.
It was quite a massive event, really, to have a cupboard go down the stairs. I was in a state of shock as well, but we were clearing up, and I found the 3 of Pentacles and the 3 of Swords. Those 2 cards were really significantly marked and damaged, whereas the rest of the cards were okay.
It was the final straw for Caroline.
I thought, well, that's all the evidence I need. I really hadn't experienced anything like that before, and Dad had only ever told me about the activity here, and I really didn't know if it was true until I actually experienced it myself, and then I became a firm believer, and when I left here then, I vowed never to come back again, and I've never slept here since.
Many ghost hunters head straight to the attic when they visit the Ram.
I've been to the Ancient Ram Inn a few times investigating with my team, and both occasions recently we've yielded some amazing results. In one incident, I set up an infrared camera in the attic of the building, and we also placed a motion-activated light in view of this camera, hoping that something would trigger the light off and we might get to see something, and we did. We caught what appears to be a shadow figure sort of emerging itself on the back wall in the attic, and it runs quickly past, but as it does this, the motion light turns itself on, which proves that it was triggered off. Something else was in that attic, and there was nobody around. We were all downstairs at the time.
Shadow figures are quite common in the paranormal world. Generally, they're seen as corner-of-the-eye experiences, so you don't actually catch too much detail. It's something that's just caught out of the peripheral of your vision, and when you turn your head to look, there's nothing there.
Of all the unexplainable happenings that ghost hunter Chris Howley has experienced over his time investigating the Ram, none have been scarier than the close call he had on the stairs.
One of the reports of the staircase is of a demonic force that will try and push you down these stairs. On an overnight investigation, we came into the building, we thought we would set a camera up, so we placed a camera in that crevice at the top there, looking down the stairs, and I had a small Newton's cradle, which I thought would be a good idea to place on the shelf. Now, I had one of my team members checking the monitor, so I put the cradle down, radioed through, is it in shot? Said, yeah, all's good. I then turned round to go back down the stairs. The walkie-talkie went off with a load of expletives as he witnessed this come off the shelf, and it flew past my head, down my right-hand side, and lay in a tangled mess at the bottom of the stairs. It was quite a frightening experience, but I was more disappointed that we hadn't managed to press record.
Experts believe that it's the powerful energy inside the ancient Ram that makes it such a supernatural hotspot.
Energy's everything, really. Especially if you're like a sensitive, you know, that's the first thing you'll pick up on. But I mean, even normal people will walk into a building, particularly here, and you'll feel, you know, the hairs on your neck will go up. You'll feel uncomfortable, and you'll feel, you know, all these sort of emotions you wouldn't expect to feel walking into a building. I mean, this building is on 2 ley lines as well. So the energy here is probably pretty pumping, because I think that sort of feeds the activity, you know, definitely.
All the energy generated by the building leads to a real mix of spirits.
So there have been lots of different reported hauntings taking place at the Ancient Ram, with some being malicious and some being benign. It's quite a common thing that you see with a building so old as this. So many people have come through over the years that there'll be lots of different characteristics of the ghosts.
There are some spirits in here which are light-hearted, I think, because I remember one of our sessions, a couple of the people just started giggling like children. Just completely out of the blue, and this laughing went on for about 20 minutes.
It's a good sign, though. That means we've got some energies going on.
Obviously, because of the ambience of the place, it was a bar, you know, it's full of people having a good time. Those energies are going to be residual and imprinted in the fabric of the building, and people latch onto those. Pretty sure there are some sort of nice guys rather than all doom and gloom, but there are some proper ones you wouldn't want to mess with here for sure.
It's just like people in the real world. You're around a negative, nasty person, and they hear laughing, and they see smiling, and, you know, have somebody be nice to them, and they're just like, ugh, I don't know. Get me away from that. That's exactly how spirit is. They want that negative. They feed off of that chaos, and they'll even try to create it, even if it's just like mood swings, little things, little subtle. Spirit's very subtle. That's why they don't just come out and say, hey, I'm here, bang, boom, because they're very, very subtle.
But not all the spirits at the ancient ram are subtle. An evil spirit that inhabits the barn is known to terrify anyone who goes inside. The ancient Ram Inn is reputedly Britain's most haunted building. The medieval house is steeped in history and flooded with paranormal activity. Some of the spirits are good-natured, but in the barn, the ram shows its evil side.
We did experience quite a lot of activity whilst we were there. Some of the live streams actually picked that up, but one of the main things that we experienced was inside the barn area. Now, inside the barn area, it is notorious for a dark, tall, brooding figure. Now, he made himself known in a form of a mist that one of my colleagues actually caught on an iPhone. And once we slowed the stills down, we actually found that there was a face on the inside of this mist. So that was quite an extraordinary find for our evidence.
Phil Jones has also experienced the malevolent spirit in the barn.
The first time I experienced the black mass coming towards you at speed, that was really unnerving because you've got no way of getting out and this thing's just coming towards you. You try to rationalise, is it my eyes playing tricks? Is it because my eyes are focused into the dark or whatever? But you could see this mass changing shape as it was moving.
When you actually see that, it is quite exciting. And I think the adrenaline starts to flow then and you kind of want more things to happen.
Two of the other more evil spirits reportedly residing at the ram are the demonic incubus and his female counterpart, the succubus.
Traditionally, the incubus and the succubus will attack their victims at night, so they tend to prey on individuals while they're asleep, or they might find themselves waking up and feel like they are being attacked.
I don't know how to say it. It sort of is sexual with you in your dreams, and I guess you can hear the succubus like sounds like they're high heels, but really it's her hooved feet coming for you.
A lot of the spirits that you encounter are quite peaceful in nature. They will just catch your attention and disappear. Incubus and succubus form part of the darker realm, and these are more evil in their intent.
Ghost hunter Lee Bullock tried to make contact with the succubus during one of his investigations at the ancient ram.
We use an EMF device to pick up electromagnetic fluctuations. It's changes in the environment, electromagnetic forces. So if you've got one, if you have a kettle, for instance, if you put the kettle on and put it next to it, it'll go up. It's picking up on the electricity around the area. During the investigation, we always like to try and split up when we can. On this occasion, we split up and I was up here. I lay down on the bed. I was asking for the succubus spirit to interact with me.
If there's anybody in this building with us, if you can come into this room, please.
I thought, well, I'll put my laser pen on, see if anything can break the beams. I put it on and the EMF detector went off. So I turned my laser pen off, sat up, asked it to do it again, and it did.
That's you. Can you make that device?
I asked it to do it again, and it did.
Can you make it go off?
I can't explain it because it had been there throughout the investigation. not really gone off. So why it went off then, I don't know.
Thank God I've never experienced it, because I wouldn't be here sat talking to you now if I'd experienced incubus activity. I'm lucky in a sense that I just get poltergeist activity, and I think almost this building has a sense of respect that it doesn't freak me out too much. It's almost like it likes me.
But Caroline's father, John, didn't get away so lightly. He was known to be tormented by the succubus during his time at the Ancient Ram.
I think it scared him a little bit because he was trained to be a Baptist minister when he came out of the RAF, and he wasn't interested in ghosts, but his belief in the Holy Ghost meant that he should have some sort of respect for the spirits that are here. But apparently the first night he stayed here, he got dragged out of bed by his wrists.
John's first night in the Ancient Ram Inn was quite an eventful one. He was sleeping in the old man's kitchen, and in the middle of the night was forcibly dragged out of bed and thrown across the room. Quite a frightening experience for anybody.
The location of John's first experience with the succubus has now been partly dug up.
So here we have the spot where John spent his first night in the Ram Inn before being violently dragged out of his bed. As you can see, it's now an open grave. It was the Swindon ghost hunters in 1999 who encouraged John to have this excavated. Bones and the ceremonial daggers were found. These were taken away and analysed. John told me in the past that the police took the bones away. He didn't hear anything else back from that. The daggers were examined by a university in Bristol and were verified as ancient ceremonial daggers. So were they used in some ritualistic occultist sacrifice, or were they just part of the pagan burial ground and whatever went on in those dark days? I don't think we'll ever know. With a grave like this within the walls of the Ram Inn, it's no surprise that the building is so haunted. If we could dig deeper, who knows what we could find here.
The Ancient Ram Inn is as important to the paranormal community as it is to any historian. 1,000 years of life have been lived inside the medieval building, and although no humans currently reside in the extraordinary bedrooms, the Ram is still packed to the rafters with spirits.
It's good to keep a place that's got so much history. It'd be a shame for this place to go. It's important not only to the community around here, but to the paranormal world. You know, so many people have investigated it, so many future generations of investigators are going to want to investigate it.
The Ancient Ram Inn is a national treasure. It's a piece of history that needs to be preserved. Not more so for the ghost hunters who keep coming here, but I think historically the building is a fantastic location. You can feel the energy as you walk in. It's a building that's had an awful lot of life, good and bad, over its many, many years of existence, and it's a building that does need looking after.
The Ancient Ram remains a listed building, so it won't be disappearing anytime soon. And with a past so dark, the future looks bright.
John has left a legacy with the Ancient Ram Inn, and I know Caroline, his daughter, is doing a fantastic job in keeping that legacy going. She's keeping the building open, and we still get ghost hunters coming down here looking for the spirits that inhabit these walls.
I love it like my dad did. I feel a bit like Indiana Jones. I'm kind of on a voyage of discovery. I want to find out so much more about it, like my dad did. I'm fascinated by the history and the stories and the things these walls could tell if only they could speak. It would be amazing.